Hello, Jack. I'm actually going back and listening to all 4 of your videos. I'm just going to turn this into one big response. I'll start off by saying that sometimes the way you challenge me is kind of like we're in a court of law. It's like I'm the prosecuting attorney leveling the charges against the defendant, and you're the defendant's lawyer. Now, from what I understand, in court, the defendant's lawyer doesn't have to prove that the person is innocent. They just have to create reasonable doubt. Their job is just to poke enough holes in the prosecution's argument that the person can't be rightfully convicted. So let's say your defendant was on the hook for murder, and he doesn't have an alibi that can be corroborated by anybody because he was home alone, or so he says. You don't necessarily have to prove that this guy was at home. You can just say stuff like, and let's just say your guy was a black guy who was accused of killing a woman. You could say things like, witness testimony says that the last person they saw this female with was a white guy. And again, that doesn't prove that that black guy couldn't have come up after that white guy and still killed the female. However, that still does count as a little hole getting poked in the prosecution's argument, and if you poke enough of those holes, then that's reasonable doubt. You're arguing some of these points like you're just trying to create reasonable doubt and not necessarily prove me wrong. You want to discredit me without actually proving me wrong. And one way you do that is kind of through ad hominem. Like if I say young upper echelon black men are arrogant, you come back with, well, maybe you're just bitter because they didn't pick you. Okay, fine. Let's say that that was true. Does that prove that what I'm saying is false? All that really does is question my motive for making the criticism. It doesn't make my criticism false. So even if you did prove I was bitter, which you haven't, you're still a long way from proving me wrong. You keep trying to make everything about me and not the larger picture. And sometimes, just like Sergeant Willie Pete, you try to put the actions or the arguments of other black women into my mouth. Like, for example, you asked me if I dated any pre-med students or pre-law students when I was in school. Black ones, that is. And I said no, except for this one guy who was kind of interested in me and we talked, but we never really got around to dating. And you came back with, well, how can you fault them for not wanting you now when you didn't want them back then? I didn't say that. Nowhere did I say I was not interested in them. First of all, you know about me that I don't approach men. I only respond to men who come up to me. Other than that one guy, none of the pre-med, pre-law black guys hit on me. It wasn't my choice. But one thing you need to know about me is I was never that stereotypical black girl who liked the Lil Wayne types when she was younger, and then as soon as I get 35 and got 2 kids, I want a doctor. I wanted the doctor from the start. One thing you said, and I just want to go ahead and get this in while I'm thinking about it, you said something like when you asked how black men are arrogant, I didn't give you any examples. I just said go ask other black women. Not true. I did give you examples, but when I give you examples, you say, well, maybe that's just you. So then I have to say, okay, then fine, ask other women. And then it becomes, oh, well, just because a bunch of women say something don't make it true. Okay, at that point, I'm going to have to ask you, what evidence do you need? What's going to be good enough that you won't do these little easy dismissals like, oh, maybe it's just you? I'll tell you right now, I don't have any stats. I don't even think there are any stats on this. I mean, what do you want? A video of it? I don't have a video, and I don't have stats, so tell me what you need. I don't think it's fair for me to present my evidence and you just dismiss it with, well, I don't believe that. Just because everybody thinks it doesn't mean it's true. Just because she looks Mexican and speaks Spanish doesn't mean she is. Or, you know, you could walk into a room where a person is standing over a dead body and they've got a knife in their hand and blood on their hands, and you literally could say, just because I'm standing here with this knife and the blood on my hands doesn't mean I killed them. Now that is true, but come on. You gotta do better than that. Either accept my evidence or present a counter-argument. Or attack my evidence with something substantial other than, well, maybe it's just you. Or hair-splitting stuff like, could it just be that you perceive them as being more arrogant? Well, how else do you determine that somebody is arrogant? There's no stats on it. There's no blood test you can do for arrogance. And it's not like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory where you can put an egg on a scale and it'll tell whether the egg is good or bad. Like there's no machine you can put a person in and it'll tell them, oh, this person's arrogant and this person's not. Arrogance is determined by perception. So is sexy, mean, stupid, ugly, beautiful, etc. Now, since perception can vary from person to person, that's why I said ask other women. If a lot of people are saying the same thing, then you should at least consider that perhaps there's something to what they're saying. Don't just dismiss it with, well, just because a lot of people say the same thing doesn't mean it's true. That's true too, but come on. What evidence do you need? What's going to be enough for you? Alright, moving on to some other points. Here's one straw man argument that you made against me. You said that I want black men to lower their standards, but I won't lower mine. I have corrected you on this many times. I have never said black men should lower their standards. I don't know where you're getting this from other than it makes it easier for you to make your point, which is what a straw man is. I have never said that black men, or any men for that matter, should lower their standards. I did fine with the beauty standards just where they're at, and like I said, I was never hell-bent, except for that one little period in my life, I was never hell-bent, oh, I got to have me a black man. I mean, if it happened, fine, but if it didn't happen, that's just as fine. Now, if you wanted me to answer the question, even though it's loaded with stuff I didn't say, why would I want black men to lower their standards, but I won't lower mine? The reason would be, and well, I'll say just part of the reason would be, is that I think that if the shoe were on the other foot, they would not give me a break. And I mean on the beauty thing, not on money. And before you ask, well, how do you know that? I don't know that. That's just how I feel. I'll readily admit that I might just be projecting. Another reason why I wouldn't lower my standards is because, and let's just take race out of this for a second, why would I marry a high school guidance counselor if I can marry an engineer? Alright, now let me put race back into it. The benefits of having a black husband, to me, don't outweigh the benefits of being married to an engineer. Now, for some black people it would, but not me. Now, you're probably going to try and flip that and say, well, why would a man marry a 7 when he can have a 10 looks-wise? Well, I will preface answering that by saying, again, a man can do whatever he wants. But if you want me to answer the question, if the women are equally qualified, then I could see him using beauty to break the tie and going for the 10. However, if the 7 is a better woman, and again, you can do what you want to do, so don't come back with, well, you don't get to decide what we pick. I know, but since you asked me the question, I'm just answering it. Well, you didn't ask it, but I think you will. Anyway, if the 7 is a better woman, then will those few extra points of fineness outweigh the benefits of having a better woman? I mean, beauty doesn't amount to anything profound. It literally is skin deep. Next point, you said I created a false dichotomy by saying that a rich man can do things that a poor man can't. And you said I was acting like there was only rich and poor and nothing in between. Well, you're taking that statement out of context, and before you roll your eyes, look at what I said before that. I was making the point that pretty women can't do anything an ugly woman can do as far as a relationship goes. Now, of course, a pretty woman can win a beauty contest and an ugly one can't, but I mean, as far as, being a good wife, your beauty doesn't, okay, maybe you might come a little bit faster with a hotter chick, but in general, an ugly woman can fix your food, she can iron your clothes, she can bear your children, whatnot. But anyway, I was basically saying, an ugly woman can do the same things a pretty woman can. However, a poor man can't do the things a rich man can do. Now, if you were so concerned about my false dichotomy, then why didn't you call me out on both of them? You weren't serious about that allegation. You were just trying to use what I said to try to say that, oh, you're just like the people you accuse. Of course I know there's black, white, and shades of gray. You're just reaching. But getting back to my point, marrying a rich guy, a regular guy, and a poor guy is the difference between what neighborhood you live in. It's whether or not you take vacation once a year or never. It's whether your kids can go to private school or the shitty public school they're zoned for. So let's not sit there and act like money and beauty are exactly tit for tat. They're tit for tat only in the sense that men look for beauty and women look for money. But beauty is not as useful as money. Money can change your life. Beauty, not necessarily. There's beautiful people all over the world who are poor. Captain Solo even made a video about that. He was talking about how everybody was talking about he was such a beautiful baby, but when he grew up and he was, still a nice looking guy, he ended up out on the street for several years. Or at least I think it was several years. And he even made a statement like, my beauty, we didn't say beauty, but my good looks didn't keep me from being out on the street. So again, let's not act like money and beauty are tit for tat. And just a little side note, Captain made a video about this, so I'm not telling something that he already said himself. And not to mention the fact that beauty is guaranteed to fade. Guaranteed. Not necessarily true for wealth. Or perhaps maybe I should say looks are guaranteed to fade, not necessarily beauty, because there are some beautiful older women too. Next point. You said it wasn't fair for me to accuse you of cheering for the black women videos but booing the black men videos. Well, actually, Jack, you're a bit suspect because you've never responded to any of the videos that I've made about black women. You've only responded to ones I've made about black men. So, again, that's a bit suspect. And then you said that my accusations were unfair. Okay, why are they unfair? Because they're not true? Or what grounds are you calling them unfair? Just 'cause you just say so? Do you have a counter argument as to why it's not fair? Next thing, you accuse me of the composite Negro thing. I asked the question, why do I go from fine to alright depending on the level of the guy? Now, Jack, I already knew the answer to that question. I mean, Notorious B.I.G. before his money, I could have bagged him easily, but after the money, I'd have to get in line. It was more like kind of a rhetorical question just to see what people would say, but I know that men who have more money have more options, so the competition is steeper. But then when you add in that extra layer, which is why am I hot enough for white doctors but not black, then that gets to be an interesting question. If I was just asking flat out, why do broke ass men like me but rich men I'm not even on their radar, if I was just asking that, then the answer is very obvious. I put the question out there because I wanted to see what black guys would say. This is part of the way I get my information. I ask people just to see what they say. And then you come in and somehow transform that into me saying they need to lower their standards for me. Then you ask me something like, okay, if they weren't picking you, then who were they picking? You asked me that question in response to a video where I talked about my little period of racial guilt. I started feeling like I should be with a black guy for whatever reason. That's when I noticed that the upper echelon ones weren't there. So then you come and ask me, well, if they weren't dating you, then who were they dating? Well, I don't know. They weren't there. There's no contradiction. Then you said they went from being absent to being arrogant. Okay, I've never dated any black doctors or engineers. I have, however, dated black guys who were exceptions. They were on my level, maybe a tad above, but I've never had a black guy that was way above my level. I have, however, had non-black guys who were. The situation I described in my last video where a guy will tell me, I'm gonna call you on Tuesday, doesn't call till like Thursday, those weren't upper echelon guys as defined as, doctors, lawyers, and people who, are really up there. However, they were exceptions compared to the general population of black men. So again, there's no contradiction and there's no compositing. Now, as for the guys who were saying there were no good black women, I was talking about Sergeant Willie Pete. Him and his crew over on Gen X and also some of the black guys here on YouTube. I don't recall ever hearing a black guy was dating saying expressly there were no good black women. And then I think you asked me something like, well, were the black guys that you dated in college, were they saying that? No. Like I said before, I went to Ole Miss, that's the Deep South. I'm talking about a school whose mascot was a plantation owner and the school flag was the Confederate flag. Interracial relationships between blacks and whites, especially black men and white women, unacceptable. Because just like Amway Boot Camp said, if they found out a white girl was fucking a black guy, she would be blacklisted. So anyway, since women of other races in that city were not an option, they couldn't say there's no good black women. They would just say they would just avoid the women that they didn't like and go for the ones they liked. And they're all black. And there was no threatening to go outside the race from these guys. It wasn't an option. So again, there's no contradictions and there's no compositing. I will apologize if I was unclear. Another point you made is that I'm not being very specific about how these young black men are being arrogant other than saying that they keep threatening you with their options. That's not true. I said they feel like you don't have a right to question them even when they're wrong. They act like they're doing you a favor. And they act like since supposedly you don't have any options, they can treat you however they want, like show up late or say they're going to call you this day but call you a different day. And before you come off with another one of those, well, that don't mean nothing argument, I know what a guy acts like when he feels like he's lucky to have me. He's not going to be late, or at least not habitually. He's going to call when he says he's going to call, and he's going to do what he says he's going to do because he's going to be too afraid that somebody else will step in and snatch me up. A man who is really interested in a woman is protective of that woman, just like Steve Harvey said. My guy, before we got married, we went to a casino once, and we were sitting at a table, and I said, I'll be right back, I'm going to the bathroom. So I get up to go to the bathroom, and before I went to the bathroom, I looked back to just, wave at him and let him know, here I am. And he was right there behind me. Like, he was there because he didn't want nobody else to come up to me. So don't suggest that it's just my perception that a guy isn't taking me seriously if he says he's going to call Tuesday and doesn't get around till Thursday. Now, the guys that I dated that I had these experiences with, they were exceptions, but they weren't like upper echelon. I mean, do you really think my perception is off, or are you just trying to create reasonable doubt? And as far as suggesting or hinting that I'm sensitive, how many females here on YouTube do you know that leaves their comment section wide open? I do not delete comments. I do block people from time to time, but not just because they disagree with me. They have to be like being an asshole or something. So I might be a lot of things, but sensitive isn't one of them. Alright, again, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to make another video, which I'll release sometime in the next few days. I've noticed that if I drop too many videos at one time, they don't get viewed as much. Alright, until next time, America.